Imagine you have never once been truly alone, not for a single hour of your entire life. You were born in front of the group. You slept every night, surrounded by 20 other bodies, breathing in the dark. And you will die the same way, in full view, because privacy, as you understand it, does not exist yet. It hasn't been invented. There is no door to close, no room to retreat to, no wall thin or thick, because there are no walls at all, just one shared space where everyone eats, sleeps, grieves, and mates within arm's reach of everyone else they've ever known. Now ask yourself the question that should be impossible to answer under those conditions. How do you fall for someone? How do you choose a partner? Keep a secret? Build something private? When private isn't a concept your species has gotten around to yet. For most of human history, attraction wasn't a feeling you got to have quietly. It was a negotiation conducted in public, under constant watch, with consequences that could ripple through an entire band for generations. Today, you swipe, you match, you text, you go somewhere quiet, and if it goes badly, you delete the app and nobody in your family ever has to know. For you, mating is private by default. Awkward maybe, but invisible if you want it to be. For a human being 40,000 years ago, living in a group of 20 to 50 people who never left each other's sight, that same basic decision, who to be with, could not stay invisible even if you wanted it to. And that single fact reshaped nearly everything about how early human relationships actually worked. Here's the first problem nobody thinks about. If you live your entire life inside one group of 20 to 50 people, the dating pool inside that group is small, and it's related to you. Your cousins are your only neighbors. Your options within the band are limited, and choosing one of them carries a biological cost that modern dating apps don't have to solve for. So early humans needed a system, and the archaeological record suggests they found one. At a site called Sunghir in Russia, dated to roughly 34,000 years ago, researchers recovered the remains of several individuals buried together with an extraordinary amount of care, thousands of ivory beads, ornaments, tools. When geneticists analyzed the DNA, they found something that reshaped how we think about Ice Age social structure. These people were not closely related to each other. Despite living and dying in what looks like a single tight community, their genetic relationships suggest deliberate mate exchange between different bands, a network stretching across the landscape specifically built to avoid the genetic collapse that comes from small, isolated groups, breeding only within themselves. Someone was tracking who was related to whom across bands that might be separated by days of walking, and using that information to decide who could pair with whom. This wasn't accidental. This was infrastructure. So if your options inside the group were limited, the solution was to look outside it, which meant contact between bands mattered enormously, and that contact came with its own brutal logic. When two groups met, a mating opportunity wasn't just a personal moment between two people. It was a political event. Alliances got formed or tested. Resources, territory, and future obligations were all quietly on the table the moment two strangers from different bands showed interest in each other. A pairing between bands could mean access to a hunting ground during a bad season. It could mean an extra set of hands during a birth, or advance warning about where a dangerous predator had been seen. Falling for someone wasn't separate from survival strategy. It was survival strategy, dressed up as attraction. But even inside your own group, choosing a partner wasn't simple, because you were being watched, constantly, by people who had a stake in your choice. There's a reason evolutionary biologists study something called mate choice copying, and there's evidence it runs deep in human behavior. Who a group's most respected or successful members chose to pair with actually shifted who else in the group found that person desirable. Attraction wasn't purely internal. It was partly social consensus built in public, shaped by an audience that never left. And here's where it gets stranger. Because your own body may have been working against your ability to keep any of this private. Unlike most primates, human females don't have an obvious visible signal of peak fertility. No swelling, no dramatic color change, nothing that announces to the entire group exactly when conception is most likely. Scientists call this concealed or hidden ovulation, and there are competing theories for why it evolved. But one of the leading ideas is almost unsettling in a group living context. If nobody, including the woman herself in some formulations of the theory, could reliably tell exactly when she was most fertile, it became far harder for any one male to guard her exclusively, or to know with certainty whose offspring was whose. In a camp with 20 other people watching everything you do, that biological uncertainty may have been doing quiet, constant work, changing who bothered guarding whom, and how paternity confidence shaped who invested time and food in which children. And speaking of children, once one arrived, an entirely different kind of intimacy took over. Because raising a child in the Paleolithic wasn't a two-person project. Human infants are born helpless for far longer than almost any other primate, and the caloric and time investment required to keep one alive is enormous. This is where a concept researchers call cooperative breeding, or allomothering, comes in. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and unrelated group members all regularly fed, carried, and cared for children that weren't biologically their own. Some researchers argue this shared care system is one of the reasons human children survive at all, given how long and how expensive human infancy is compared to other primates, which means the group wasn't just watching who you mated with. The entire group had a direct stake in the outcome because they were about to spend years of their own energy keeping that child alive. Now here's something that reframes almost everything you just heard. Even scent may not have been neutral in all this. Researchers have studied a set of immune system genes called the MHC complex, and there's evidence, first shown decades ago in a famous sweaty t-shirt study, and revisited many times since, that people tend to find the body odor of partners with different MHC gene profiles more attractive than those with similar ones. The theory is that mating with someone whose immune genetics differ significantly from your own produces offspring with a broader, more resilient immune system. If something like that operated in small ice age bands where everyone already shared a lot of genetic material, it would have functioned as a built-in biological alarm, quietly steering people away from genetically similar partners inside their own crowded related group and towards strangers from somewhere else. Attraction, in other words, may have partly been your immune system doing genetic math you were never consciously aware of. So pull all of this together, and mating in the deep past wasn't romantic in the way we picture romance now. It was closer to a constant, overlapping negotiation between your own instincts, your body's hidden signals, your group's collective opinion, cross-band political alliances, and a network of relatives tracking who was related to whom across a landscape most of them would never fully see. There was no private conversation. There was no quiet first date. Every part of it happened inside a group that depended on the outcome for its own survival, which meant your most personal decision was never really only yours. And maybe that's the part that should actually unsettle you, more than any single fact about hidden ovulation or immune genes or ancient burial sites. You've spent your whole life assuming that who you're attracted to is the most private, most individual thing about you. But the wiring underneath that feeling, the instincts that decide who catches your eye and who doesn't, were built across hundreds of thousands of years inside groups where nothing was private at all. The privacy is new. The feeling underneath it is not. Every time you feel a pull towards someone you can't fully explain, your running code that was written by people who never had a door to close, who negotiated attraction in front of an entire camp, and who somehow, against every modern instinct you have about how relationships should work, made it work well enough that you're sitting here to wonder about it.